The gunshot echoed through the parking lot like thunder splitting the sky, and in that fraction of a second, Thomas Mitchell's entire world narrowed to one simple truth: he would die before he let that little girl get hurt. The bullet tore through his shoulder as he threw himself in front of the child, his body crashing against the cold concrete as blood pooled beneath him, mixing with the rain that had just begun to fall. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she came from. All he knew was that when he saw the masked man raise that gun toward the terrified 6-year-old girl standing frozen near the grocery store entrance, every instinct in his body screamed at him to move, to protect, to shield her the way he wished someone had shielded his own daughter from the cruelty of this world. Thomas was no hero. He was a 34-year-old single father barely scraping by, working double shifts at a warehouse to keep his 7-year-old daughter Emma fed and clothed after his wife abandoned them 3 years ago. His hands were calloused, his back ached constantly, and most nights he fell asleep in his work clothes because he was too exhausted to change. But in that moment, lying on the ground with searing pain radiating through his body, watching the masked man flee into the darkness, he felt no regret. The little girl stood above him now, her brown eyes wide with shock, tears streaming down her face as she clutched her stuffed rabbit to her chest. Thomas tried to smile at her, tried to tell her everything would be okay, but the words wouldn't come. His vision blurred, and the last thing he heard before darkness took him was the sound of someone screaming for help. If you believe in selfless love, in ordinary people doing extraordinary things, in the power of sacrifice, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories that restore faith in humanity. When Thomas opened his eyes, he wasn't in heaven or hell. He was in a hospital room, machines beeping steadily beside him, and his shoulder felt like it had been set on fire. A nurse noticed him stirring and quickly called for the doctor, but before anyone could explain what happened, the door burst open and a woman walked in who commanded attention without saying a word. She wore an expensive navy suit, her dark hair pulled back perfectly, but her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Behind her stood the little girl from the parking lot, holding tightly to the woman's hand, and suddenly Thomas understood. This was her mother. Victoria Chen was a name everyone in the city knew. She was the CEO of Chen Technologies, a self-made billionaire who had built her empire from nothing, a woman featured on magazine covers and interviewed on national television. She was power and success personified, the kind of person who lived in a world Thomas could never touch. But as she stood at his bedside, her perfectly composed exterior crumbled, and Thomas saw something he never expected to see in someone like her: genuine, overwhelming gratitude mixed with devastating guilt. She told him that she had been working late, as always, and her daughter Sophie had been with the nanny who was supposed to pick her up from dance class. But there had been a miscommunication, and Sophie had wandered outside looking for their car, right into the path of that robber who had just fled from the store with a cash register drawer in his hands and a gun in his belt. Victoria's voice broke as she explained how she had arrived exactly 3 minutes after the shooting, how she had found her daughter physically unharmed but emotionally traumatized, standing over a stranger who had saved her life. The police had told her what Thomas did, how he hadn't hesitated, how he had thrown himself between her daughter and death without a second thought. She kept saying she was sorry that her work obsession had led to this, sorry that her daughter had been in danger, sorry that Thomas had been hurt protecting a child who wasn't even his own. But Thomas just shook his head weakly, his voice hoarse when he finally spoke. He told her about Emma, about how he would want someone to do the same for his daughter if she were ever in danger, about how some things matter more than our own safety. He told her that the moment he saw Sophie's face, he didn't see a stranger's child. He saw every child, every innocent life worth protecting, every reason humanity still had hope. What Thomas didn't know was that his act of heroism had cost him more than blood and pain. The doctor had informed him while he was unconscious that the bullet had damaged nerves in his shoulder, and he wouldn't be able to do the heavy lifting his warehouse job required for at least 6 months, maybe longer. He had no savings, no safety net, no way to support Emma while he recovered. He hadn't told Victoria this, hadn't wanted to burden her with his problems, but she had already found out. She had already made calls. When she visited him the next day, she didn't come with pity or charity. She came with respect and a proposition. Her company needed someone to head their new community outreach program, someone who understood what real sacrifice looked like, someone with genuine character. The salary was more than Thomas had made in 3 years combined, and it came with full medical benefits, flexible hours so he could be there for Emma, and the chance to create programs that would help other struggling families like his. Thomas stared at her in disbelief, tears welling in his eyes as he realized this woman wasn't offering him a handout. She was offering him a future, a chance to provide for his daughter the way he had always dreamed, a way to turn his moment of courage into a lifetime of purpose. Victoria explained that she had spent her whole life chasing success, building her empire, proving she could compete with anyone, but in those terrible minutes when she thought she might have lost Sophie, she realized she had been neglecting what mattered most. She had been given a second chance, and she wanted to give Thomas one too. More than that, she wanted Sophie to grow up knowing the man who saved her, understanding the value of selflessness, learning from someone who embodied true heroism not because it came with recognition or reward, but because it was simply the right thing to do. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that goodness still exists in this world, please hit that like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss stories that inspire. It takes just a second but means everything to us. Months later, Thomas stood in his new office, a photograph of Emma on his desk beside a drawing Sophie had made of him as a superhero with a cape. His shoulder had healed better than expected, and though it still ached on rainy days, it was a reminder of the day his entire life changed. He had coffee with Victoria every week now, discussing community programs and sharing stories about their daughters who had become best friends. He had gone from barely surviving to thriving, from feeling invisible to knowing his life mattered, and it had all started with one split-second decision to value another human life above his own comfort and safety. Comment below with a heart emoji if you believe in the power of sacrifice and second chances. The truth Thomas had learned, the truth he now helped others discover, was that heroism isn't about being fearless or invincible. It's about being terrified and broken and exhausted, and still choosing to protect something more precious than yourself. It's about single fathers working double shifts, about busy mothers learning to slow down, about children who never forget the strangers who saved them. It's about the 3 minutes between a bullet and a second chance, between an ending and a beginning, between despair and hope. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe rewards those who give everything expecting nothing in return, not with fame or fortune, but with something far more valuable, the chance to keep giving, to keep loving, to keep being the person their children need them to be. Thomas had taken a bullet for a stranger's child, and in return, he had been given back his life, his purpose, and his faith that in a world full of darkness, there will always be people willing to be the light.